This latest webinar in our series focusing on financial centres of the world. Today we're taking a look at Montreal, and you're very welcome to the webinar. To just explain a bit about the structure, we'll have some presentations, and there will be some time for some questions right at the end of the session. You'll find in the dashboard, you can see on your screen, there's a questions tab. You can type a question into that box, and we'll try and pick those up and field those towards the end. There'll also be a recording of the session available after the event, and we'll email that out to you. Finally, there's a handout section in your dashboard, and you'll find a copy of the slides which are being used today in that handout section, so you can follow them through if you need to. So I'm going to move on without delay to introduce today's panel. First of all, we're going to be hearing from Steve Gauthier, the Vice President of Corporate Development for Finance Montreal. Steve is going to tell us a bit about developments in Montreal and what makes Montreal a particularly special place as a financial centre. We'll also hear an external view about Montreal from our chairman, Michael Mainelli, and as I say, we'll go on to questions at the end of that. So without any further from me, I'm going to pass on to Steve. Steve, over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome to everyone from my basement here in Montreal. Like the rest of the world, we are on lockdown for now, so my apologies for maybe it's a bit dark around me, but I'll do my best. Essentially, today, I don't want to do a presentation point by point on everything that is positive and good about the city of Montreal. What I want is to put in place or to put forward a thesis of why Montreal. And as you can see on this slide, the title, a ready ecosystem of future state skills at distant cost advantage. Essentially, this is a summary of what Montreal is all about. So if you allow me, I will take maybe 3 points to exemplify why Montreal is a ready ecosystem of future skills in financial industry. So the next slide, please. But first off, I want to introduce properly Finance Montreal. Finance Montreal is an association. We have 47 members in Montreal, the largest financial institutions, for 3 missions. The first one is the Fintech. Then we have also working groups. And also the third mission is the international investment. And this is my division. So we are asked to bring more companies to locate activities in Montreal. The next slide is about the fast facts about Montreal, just for your reading maybe. It will help you to understand the G7 quality of my city. So the thesis, if we go to page 5 now, yeah, this is the fast facts about the city of Montreal. The thesis that I just mentioned, I want to emphasize 3 points with you, to nail 3 points for you to understand what it means essentially. On page 6, you're going to see my first point that I want to make you aware of is that Montreal is a G7 well-established financial city with all the bank, about 110,000 people in finance. It is the second largest industry in the city. The first one is IT. So you see the numbers here. We have a significant banking industry, the same with the instruments, the same with capital markets. The professional designations are the same as you will find in New York and London. So it's an Anglo-Saxon industry. You have the numbers of professionals because talent is a big thing for sure now in our industry. And as you can see, the numbers here are professional associations here locally. Just to give you an idea, New York is larger than Montreal, 7 times larger than Montreal, but they don't have 7 times more of those professionals in New York. For example, accountants, they have less than 2 times more accountants in New York City than we have up here. The same with the CFAs. They don't have 7 times more CFAs. They have 3 times, I think, more CFAs than Montreal. So all things being equal, the talent for a smaller financial hub is as good as you will find in any tier 1 city. As you can see here, the banking industry is well established. All the Canadian banks for sure. We have about 200 foreign affiliates also located in the city, going from Morgan Stanley to State Street to Pictet. All the insurance, all the big Canadian insurance companies are here, some Americans as well, some Europeans. In terms of pension funds, it's a brand and well known in Canada. All the big pension funds, half of them are located also in the city. And the Montreal Exchange, specialized in derivatives, is also here in Montreal. When you trade derivative, by the way, in Boston, London, Frankfurt, it's all on software developed and maintained at the Montreal Exchange. So they are specialists of derivative trading. So this is the first point that I want to make. Why it's already ecosystem is because it's a G7, well-established, well-diversified. We have about 5,000 students a year in finance, in accounting. So we produce more talent that we can hire locally. So that's why we are welcoming company to come and locate activities up here. So that's the first point that I want to make clear with you. The second point, if we go to page 7, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and I'm throwing at you, dear customers. Here at the bottom is the box at the bottom of the page that is the most relevant. That is that with Fintech, with AI, with advanced analytics, guess what? Cost hubs, just to cut costs, is no longer enough. Now what matters is talent for smart automation to use analytics to enhance your customer's experience. So this is a trend that is not for the future. It's right here today. That's why here, when I go, for example, and I'll pick, I hope I don't have a JP Morgan executive on the line today, but let's say I meet with JP Morgan. They chose Plano, Texas a few years ago in the suburb of Dallas. I come to them and I say, hey, I'm sure that going to Plano was 10 years, 15 years ago, a good decision. But guess what? With FinTech, AI, and so on, you have no choice to rethink your geography. You have no choice to reconsider your location strategy. And this is why Montreal can have a role to enhance what you already have in Plano, Texas. The same with Goldman Sachs with Salt Lake City. Montreal, I don't want to be perceived as a threat to their location. I want to be perceived and understood as an enhancement to what they already have. So if we go to page 8, you will see that this trend is already reality. Because on page 8, it's a definition, it's a description of all the function of one of my good clients here in Montreal. So they do things like in the upper left from support to front office, to the bottom right to cybersecurity, first line and second line, with middle office, data governance. They do a lot of things here in Montreal. But in the red circle, this is the key fact that I want to show you, is that among their staff, 60% of them are millennials, 36% are X generations, and only 4% baby boomer. So it means that this company, using Montreal talent, Montreal youth, is, I think, better positioned to provide innovation into their processes and to respond better to their clients, to their global client responsiveness with new tools and new services. And again, the average age in this shared service is about 34 years old. And this is significant because the other day with my not US, but my UK representative in London, we met with a company that kindly volunteered to us that the average age in operation was 53 years old. The average age in IT was 52 years old. I just showed this slide saying, sir, you have no choice to reconsider, because with this kind of distribution of labor force, my client in Montreal has a better cost structure, and as I said, better position to bring innovation and to bring better responsiveness to their customers. So this is the challenge for you out there. You have no choice to reconsider your location strategy. The third point that I want to make, if we go to page 9, it's about Montreal, why Montreal makes sense to rethink your strategy, to redo your deployment. And this is the bars at the bottom of the page are just the number of the percentage of AI talent in those cities. So if you use LinkedIn, you go to San Francisco and you do a research on AI talent, you get about 3.67% of people on LinkedIn in San Francisco with an AI skill. You do the same for those cities, and you see Montreal is second to Boston. And then look at New York, look at Chicago. We are even ahead of those tier 1 cities. And when you compare Montreal with a tier 2 city like Phoenix, in this example, it's Phoenix in Arizona, it's not the same ballgame, if you allow me this American expression. So you see, San Francisco in AI is a special case. Boston is very strong. But what is the third city? It's my city. The next slide, again, on talent. This one is a little bit more maybe on the finance. It's about Quant. When you look at the numbers here again, it's a percentage of the financial industry with Quant skills. Boston is number one. London is second. Montreal is third. A lot of people think that Paris, they have a lot of mathematical background over there that they should be ahead of everybody. But look, Montreal, we don't have to be shy compared to any tier 1 city. You have Chicago and New York the same. And the same point is true with tier 2 cities. This time again is Dallas and Phoenix. They are lagging a bit behind. So why Montreal makes sense? First one is about talent. The second one on the next page, you will see the different transformation model that we have in Montreal. On the left-hand side is more the traditional utility hub model. We have only one client on this model. Most of our clients are using Montreal with the right-hand side model. That is that the head office is sending some function in Montreal. The Montreal team is working with an innovation team, operation team, and they work with the ecosystem in smart automation, in Fintech, with universities to improve the process. For example, I think a year and a half ago, I had an executive from New York visiting. He was sending Montreal compliance work with an innovation team. He said, Steve, what the compliance you're going to do in Montreal will be more avant-garde than what we're going to be doing in New York. Is it okay with you? Even though the team in Montreal will be a bit smaller. It's exactly what we want. We want to be more avant-garde, and we hope that this group in Montreal will grow while the headcount in New York might go down through the years, and maybe they will send more than compliance in the next few years. And sometimes with our clients on the right-hand side, sometimes they decide after improving a process to ship it back to maybe to India, where it's a little bit low cost, but this is exactly the model what we want. They want the clients to use the global strength that we have in the city, and then it's their decision to keep the function in Montreal or to redeploy it. But our hope is to bring more and more of those processes to be put forward. So this is the second reason why Montreal makes sense. The next page, it's about cost. When you look, this is a model with 125 people working in the middle office operations with innovation. So part of the jobs are IT, most of them are finance. You see that the difference in cost between Montreal and New York is simple to double. New York is twice as expensive as Montreal. The same with London, 62%. Continental Europe is 50%. A US tier 2 city like Dallas, like Phoenix, like Jacksonville is 40%. So you see with Montreal, you get this, as I explained, the G7 industry with a very strong, I would say, talent pool with technology in a very competitive cost environment. And on the following page, this is almost my conclusion on cost, is that you see on this graph on the x-axis, it's a cost study done by Boyd Company. It's a site located in Princeton, New Jersey. So on the left, it's low cost. On the right, it's high cost. On the y-axis is the quality of a financial center as per Chapuis and Alder, the consulting firm in finance based in Geneva. And as you can see, London or New York, let's pick on New York, you have it all. It's very expensive and it's good quality. The same with London. Expensive, very good quality. Boston, the same quadrant. We plotted 60 cities. The only city that was in the quadrant where Montreal is Montreal, where you have this balanced approach of a quality like a Boston at a fraction of a price, cheaper than a Jacksonville, a tier 2 US, a little bit more expensive in this example than Warsaw. But with all due respect, Warsaw will change in a few years when the EU will stop do all their public investment over there. But you see, it's the only city out of 60 in the upper left quadrant. And this is the balanced approach you will have in Montreal. In all your business needs that you have to be successful, we have a good story and a good solution. And the bottom line, this is where we differentiate. So our approach is very well balanced. On the next page, why Montreal makes sense. Essentially, it's an invitation to work with us. We extend a hand to work with us to understand your situation analysis, to understand your strategies, and for us to design the best solution for you, for your operations, global operations. At the bottom of the page, we have one representative in the UK and Europe, James Pitcher. I think on the line this morning, we have two representatives in New York, Serge Sondak and also Stéphane Lawandi. So we're 5 people because I have also Bruno with me in Montreal. So we have 5 people willing to meet with you, to have a meaningful conversation about your needs, your problems, your situation, your strategies, and design with you the best solution to be a little bit more avant-garde with a very good cost structure. So that was the presentation that I wanted to make, the thesis that I wanted to showcase to you, the radio ecosystem of future state skills at a fraction of the cost compared to other financial centers. All right, thank you for your attention. And now to Michael, I guess.
Thank you very much, Steve. So Michael Mainelli, on to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and in particular, thank you, Steve. That was an extremely cogent and direct presentation on selling Montreal and its advantages. I just wanted to provide a couple of sort of perspective points. Obviously, running the Global Financial Centers Index means that we tend to take a high-level view of centers around the world and compare them. Montreal is interesting for me for a variety of reasons. One of the key elements is just simply its consistency. It's always been between about 18th and 28th in the Global Financial Centers Index, GFCI, and it is just barely outside of the top 10 in the world. The scale is a 1,000-point scale, and Montreal's 28 points outside of it. So it's very much clustering there, and is often overlooked. You can gather from my accent, it's one of those centers you sort of think about. But in reality, it's far stronger than we gave it credit for when we began this index some 15 years ago. And it has always placed well. It's particularly placed well in areas like investment management, insurance, and professional services. So a lot of people who work on trading floors and things may not see Montreal as a financial center, but it most clearly is, and a very strong one at that. Obviously, it's a connected city. Obviously, as Steve emphasized, tremendous quality of talent. And I want to come back to that in my final remarks. And finally, as you go around the world, there are definitely only a handful of themes amongst financial centers. So they clearly compete on their connectivity. They can clearly compete on cost. But as you get into deeper themes, green finance comes up repeatedly, as does big data AI, as does fintech. Those are the kind of themes that somebody who's promoting a center can do something about. And Montreal within North America, which unfortunately does score poorly overall in the Global Green Finance Index, nevertheless is the strongest in North America, with its top of the table both for depth and also to some degree, well, certainly in North America, for quality. And overall in the world, it's ninth. So it's a fantastic position to be in and to grow from. Mike, the next slide. So what I would like to take as a point of view on its strengths, Steve has emphasized them, but it turns up in the data, a great business environment, way up there in the top 10 in the world, very good infrastructure. And with the moves most recently, as you'll have seen, Microsoft and others turning more assertively towards open data than they have, and quite recently, its approach to open data, which is amongst the best, is going to put it in a good competitive position. I won't go through the business environment elements or the best countries index elements. You can get those in detail on the Global Financial Centers Index website. So do go there and have a look at it. But I think it's really this human capital factor that I would stress. It's a place, as Steve pointed out to you, when you compare basically quality of life and cost, it occupies its own quadrant. It's sui generis, if you will. I'd then just like to turn to my closing slide, if I might, and that is, what's the future bring? Well, there's certainly been a tremendous amount of discussion on what is the future of financial services, and in particular, post-coronavirus. Mike, that's the next slide, please. Thank you. And the reason I emphasize this is that there is certainly apocalyptic talk. The flat that I occupy here, I look out on one side on Canary Wharf and the other side on the City of London. And it's extremely clear that some people are going to wake up post-coronavirus and say, those are some pretty expensive places to maintain for 7 or 8 weeks with nobody in them. And why am I reopening them so that my staff can have coffee together? I think we're going to be seeing some major rethinks. But this does not mean the end of financial centers or their importance. It means there's much transformation ahead. And so the emphasis that Steve placed on AI, on big data, and on those sorts of capabilities, as well as, I suspect, people looking for more resilience by distributing their operations, means that that hub model might not be the one for the future. And the model that Steve both has and is promoting is likely to be adopted, I suspect, by more people and distribute things around the place. It's always been tough for us in the GFCI because we do tend to find that there's a big distinction between distributed entities, federal countries like Canada, like America, like Germany, and the traditional models of France or the UK, where you've got this high centralization. And Montreal has been thriving in a decentralized environment for decades, and that bodes, I think, very well for it. So sadly, it may be an external view, but it very much underscores Steve's point of view that the connectivity will remain important. This focus on AI and fintech is good. Its position on green finance in North America gives it excellent positioning. And I'll leave it to Steve to focus on the cost advantage and the talent pool. But we have been watching Montreal, as I say, for 15 years with great interest. And I think it is an underrated center by many people, and certainly one that might have a glittering future ahead of it. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael. We have some time for questions. I've got a couple of questions have come in already. And if I may, I'll start with a question we've been asked. It's reasonably long, but I'll read it out. And I think one for you, Steve. Given the pressure on banks to incorporate sort of AI into the compliance function, would US or FBO establish an operation in Montreal and utilize the IT ecosystem, the talent pool to review the role of AI in compliance? And the second part of this question, that some banks are looking to implement operational efficiency and cost mitigation as banks are under pressure to manage costs. And could you give an example, I guess, of some of your recent bank clients and how they've used operations in Montreal to address those cost pressures? So first of all, the AI issue, how do you incorporate AI into compliance? And secondly, an example perhaps of a client who's managed to look at its cost base.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for the questions. I'll start off with one example of a bank executive in Montreal that explained to me that the average cost of an AI PhD working for the bank in Montreal is about $110,000 Canadian per employee. So it's unbelievably cheap. And out of deep learning, I think that the talent pool in deep learning and machine learning applied to finance is about 1,600 people in the city of Montreal for the financial industry. So the talent pool is there. The cost is really, really reasonable. So, and in terms of example, again, it's they work. Well, another aspect that I have to mention is that AI talent is competing with different industries. And Finance Montreal, we make sure that we had a group of PhDs and masters in machine learning dedicated to the financial industry every year. So every year we have a group called FinML that will provide you students interested by the financial industry with experience within the finance industry for you to tap into. So the client that I have that came from New York for compliance work is doing tutorials to this FinML group, again, to showcase their projects, but also to staff their team to bring compliance to the next level. Essentially, it's about, and again, I'm not an expert, but it's about in transaction monitoring to have all the positive, the false positive, the negative, and so on. So they are able to do it very efficiently here in Montreal. The same with KYC to onboard a client is very time consuming. So they have also processes to do it. So those are kind of example. And again, the key factor also to keep in mind is that although we are in Canada, as I explained, all the professional associations here are Anglo-Saxon. We have an American chapter of the ACAM professional designation in Montreal. So you have US talent ready also available for you to staff your compliance team. And as I said, we have FinML to provide the AI talent pool to staff also your innovation.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Another question. They're going to be mostly for you, I think, Steve, today. The question is, how much is French language a synergy? Is it more efficient and less costly for a Paris office to deal with Montreal compared with dealing with London or New York?
Yeah. Well, the French language, how can I say this, listen, my institutions are British. My way of living is American. But it happens that 2 million of Montrealers will speak French as a first language or be bilingual like me. You will have 1 million first language English. And in between, you will have about 1 million people coming from fourth, fifth generation Italians, Greek, whatever, where they're coming from. So language, it's a skill. It's a positive skills that you have in Montreal. 21% of the population speak 3 languages. And I see it because my generation, we're bilingual French and English, but the younger generation, they all have 3 languages. So you see, it's a positive thing. And again, in finance, I would say 99.9% of the people working in finance are bilingual like I am. And all my clients, they serve New York, they serve like Morgan Stanley, they serve all their global GICs out of Montreal. So language is not really an issue. And again, the mindset is very North American way of conducting business.
Okay, the last question, because I think we're going to be running out of time, but I'd like you both to comment on this. I think is the question of how does the COVID-19 crisis impact Montreal as a potential location for banking in particular? But really, what's the effect of COVID-19 on the way that centers approach business?
Well, first off, you have to know that finance was an essential business. So they had all the freedom to do whatever was necessary to conduct the business. Our clients, some are 100% working from home. Some are 98%, 99%, 97% is the lowest number I've seen of people working from home. And all my clients told us that the internet infrastructure was good enough. There was no decrease in the speed of the internet through the day. So it's almost business as usual. It's a bit indecent to say this in these times, but it was really business as usual for all my cross-border international finance. The same with the Canadian finance. I think the Canadian banks, as you know, in 2008, they were very strong. They are still strong. They are even stronger. And I think it's just a leap forward in the future that this crisis is all putting the Canadian banks and also our clients. That it's a proof that all the investment they made in IT and all the partnership they did with Fintech is paying off because, as I said, it was business as usual. But again, most of my clients also in the US are telling me that they will assess the performance of their BCP plan in the US. And again, an example, when you have a US campus, a US model of a campus with three or 4,000 people at the same place. That was decided 15 years ago. Again, Montreal can enhance this kind of model with maybe a smaller office in Montreal that will complement what you have, and you will diversify your risk. So contrary to Asia, where you had some infrastructure problems, Montreal was business as usual. It's a G7, and it showed. And again, it's going to be an opportunity for us to prove to our clients, to be with our clients into their assessment of their strategy, BCP strategy.
Yeah, I'd underscore the point that Steve is making here. The business continuity planning issues. We saw this with 9/11, where people began to realize that being too dependent on an area was something they wanted to avoid. We're seeing a move again. I think we're also seeing a move, well, we know we're seeing a move into the digitization yet more of banking, insurance, and all other aspects of finance. So as this progresses, you then see that your workforce is much more effectively an IT workforce, and an IT workforce naturally can work more from home and likes working from home in many instances. And so you've got to focus on the quality of life that you give them. Montreal scores very highly on that quality of life factor, which Steve emphasized. And so I think a combination of people wanting to distribute their workforces becoming more IT oriented, means that you want to retain them, and you're going to be a little bit less uptight about distributing them around the world. And as I said in my remarks, I believe that Montreal and comparable centers which offer that type of quality of life for ICT staff could well thrive post-coronavirus. This does not, by any means, as I said, mean that financial centers aren't important, that they are, and they will be, but for a more and more restricted set of business activities, perhaps. Thank you.
Okay, while we've been speaking, we've got two more questions come in. And we'll just try and cover those very quickly, though we're a minute or so over time. The first one is effectively, how much cheaper is Montreal than Florida, where people have put their items? And you may not have the figure on top of your head. We can always answer these in correspondence afterwards. But any thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, compared to Florida, you would say 34-35% less expensive in Montreal compared to Florida, if I remember properly my numbers. But the key thing is, I'll give you just an example. I have a client that chose Jacksonville, Florida a few years ago, and he was explaining that after 5, 6, 7 years, people are starting to retire, and to replace those people with very strong expertise, he was not able to find them in Florida. So they had to extend job offers to New Yorkers and to people in Chicago to bring them back again to Florida. So where is the saving? And
Steve, you should be emphasizing, the highest spot in Florida is 300 feet, less than 100 meters. So how high above sea level is Montreal?
Yeah, exactly. So it's about 100 meters. But you see, it's a different product. Again, I think if you chose Florida, you will need the head office to support more the head office, the regional office. In Montreal, like Morgan Stanley, they work hand in hand with New York. So I think it's easier. And talent is easier also to attract.
Okay, and very last question. Are there many data centers available to people working in Montreal?
Yeah, data center is it's 40 in the city because of our climate. In the winter you just have to open the doors to cool off the computer system. It's very easy. So data center is very big industry. The world's largest data center is in the suburb of Montreal. Not only because of the climate, but first of all, we have hydroelectricity, 99% hydroelectricity. So it's a green, renewable energy. So for your brand is also very good. And the rates are very cheap. I think the rates in Montreal are maybe 4 times less expensive than the US average. And there is no issue. And again, the Latin between Montreal and New York is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second, and it's used by a lot of companies. A lot of companies in New York after Hurricane Sally move their BCP or backup plan into Montreal, because also the electricity is on a different grid than New York, Boston region.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, Michael. We've reached the end of the session. Thank you very much for your attention today. Just thanks to the sponsors of the Financial Services Club listed on this slide. We really do appreciate your help. And as I said right at the beginning, this is a series of webinars we're running on financial centres across the world. We have another one about Gift City Gujarat next week. So please keep in touch with us. And just finally, we do run the Global Financial Centres Index and the Global Green Finance Index. If you haven't taken the survey, which underpins the index, there's a link here where you can find out how to do so. Finally, we will be sending out copies of the recording of this webcam by email. That will also include details of Steve's contacts. So if there's anything you want to follow up with Steve after the webinar, or a question you wish you'd asked and you remembered after the event, you'll be able to get in touch with Steve, and I know he'd be very pleased to hear from you and to discuss opportunities in Montreal for the future. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we will finish the webinar at that point.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mike.